Welcome everybody, it's Unstoppable Stelezzi here with the first part of my series on the Middle East culture that will be added to Age of Empires 3 Wars of Liberty in the future. As you've seen previously, we did a very big stream showcasing this whole culture, but this series will focus on teaching you every aspect of the Middle East culture as a whole, and the individual civs that will be added to it. So this can be considered an introduction in the series, and we will just be going over the Middle East culture itself, not the individual civs. In future uploads, I will go over the individual civs, their cards, their bonuses, how they play, all that sort of stuff. So today we're just going to be studying the Middle East culture. So here we are at the start of a game, and notice this big structure over here, this big giant fort. So normally when we play Age of Empires 3, or really any Age of Empires game, what do you start with? A town center, right? What does a town center do? It trains villagers, you can garrison your villagers inside there, and obviously the town center will shoot at nearby enemies when, you put the villies inside. It's more of a defensive building, right? Yeah, so how does this work, this structure? So if you look here closely, it is called a citadel. A citadel is just a very expensive town center that is much more defensive. Yeah, so basically a normal town center in the game, if you've played Definitive Edition, is like a 500 wood building. A citadel costs about 750 wood. Yeah, it's very, very powerful. And it's got a very special property to it that makes it much different than a normal town center. So a citadel actually shoots at nearby enemies all the time, not just when you garrison villagers inside. So really consider it to be almost like a big tower. Yeah, a big tower, a castle. So throughout the game, this thing will basically protect your vills not only as a place to hide, but a place that will constantly shoot at enemies coming close, whether there's reconnaissance units or really anyone trying to raid you. So that's one of the good things, is Middle East gives you the ability to essentially have a full working defensive building for that. And you can see it right here if you don't believe me. Range attack. So this means that the range attack is always active on it, right? Another thing that a citadel does, that probably your average TC doesn't do, is it also produces nomads over time. So this is a free nomad over here. What does a nomad do? So a nomad is a unit tag wise considered a scout unit, so it's actually considered to be cavalry. More so scout cavalry, right? It's not necessarily going to be a combat unit you're going to use a lot. It's more or less going to be good for scouting areas, obviously, because it walks very fast with this little staff. But his main purpose is actually to work with herdables, right? Notice how he can make goats, right? He can train goats. He can also research selective breeding, which, as you know, with other civs like the Europeans, it just makes the animals fat and faster when near a livestock pen. So what does that mean? Middle East does not have a livestock pen. They just use the nomads, right? And notice this little ring around the goat here. Look at the little ring around the goaty goat. The little right there. Basically, if you see this little ring around a goat and there's a nomad nearby, it means that the nomad is using an aura to improve the fattening rate of the goat. So think of nomads as mobile livestock pens, right? And free ones at that, because you never have to train these. Your citadel will always train them for free over time, right? So really, the Middle East is one of the only cultures in the game as a whole that encourages players to use herdables, right? With every other civ, except really maybe Argentina, I guess, right, really isn't that intense on herdables, right? Basically, they might get like 1 or 2 cards that rewards it, but nothing that extreme. In the case of Middle East as a whole, you get free livestock pens throughout the game in the form of the nomads, so it really behooves you to learn how herdables work in Age of Empires 3 and how to implement them into your build orders. So that way when you run out of food, you have a very fast way to actually eat them up. right? So yeah, most definitely, since herdable income is very, very quick when it comes to eating them, right? Speaking of which, what else do we have here? We've looked at the nomad. Now we gotta start looking at some other stuff around us. So this is our explorer here. He is our what is usually called in the game our warlord. And what this warlord is he's a special explorer that has a unique property to him. So he does everything an explorer should. He auto heals over time. He can build citadels, your town centers. He can build the caravanserai. Actually, what is a caravanserai and why does that matter? So let's just walk around here for a little bit and look for a nearby trade socket perhaps that we might be able to build something on. But in the meantime, I guess we can describe what the most important aspect of the warlord is for the Middle East. So a warlord essentially has the ability to boost one unit in your Civ's roster, basically. So in this case, he has this warlord favors Giseleches. So notice here how in Age 3 onwards you can also train said unit from the explorer directly or the warlord. So since the Afghan warlord likes the Giseleche skirmisher, that means that he can train the Giseleches directly upon Age 3 and also boost them up. And you'll notice when you're boosting up a unit, notice this sort of sun type symbol underneath the explorer there. You'll see that under the feet of the said unit if he's nearby this warlord that favors him. Right, so now we're going to build a caravanserai. A caravanserai is a trading post that's slightly more expensive. It costs about 250 wood, but it does some cool stuff for us. So the most important thing to note about a caravanserai is it's more defensive. Very defensive. And you can see already it doesn't look like a normal trading post, does it? Nah, look at this cool structure here. So this is what it looks like up close, so you can see it. So you have the little door, little window coming out of the side. It's a big imposing structure, right? Yeah. It's very durable. It's got 3,000 hit points, and it also has a ranged attack to it. So you're already starting to see a bit of a pattern with the Middle East, right? If you know anything about Middle East geography, it's out in the middle of the desert, right? So where you do see settlements, right, they're usually very fortified, right? Just like, we've seen in all sorts of movies and stuff. Basically, you got skirmishers or archers or whatever defend the fort from the knights or the British or whatever's coming after them. So that's essentially how this Middle East culture works. The citadel will shoot units automatically without you needing to do anything, and the caravanserai will do the same thing as well. And that's why it's more expensive. It starts the game with the property of an advanced trading post without being an advanced trading post. So as a result, it does need to be a bit more expensive for balance purposes. So basically, with Middle East, defenses are a lot easier between the trade and the town center. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff we need to show you as well, so we'll get to that right now, but I need some resources to do that, so let me just use a little bit of a cheat code to do that, and then we'll show you that next. That just gives us a bunch of handy resources I can use. So let's build this first structure here called the Mahala. The Mahala is our house structure for the Middle East. It's a bit different than a normal house because it actually costs about 200 wood, but it gives us 20 population space. So it's almost sort of like a Haudenosaunee longhouse in a way. Sort of, right? Just a more expensive house that gives us more pop, right? But it also has the ability to give us our capital type technologies. So we can already see some of those now. We'll be able to use more of them later, but we'll just look at a few of them we can already use. So the first one is Muezzin. Muezzin improves our building line of sight by 2. So we'll research that, and we'll be able to see a bit farther with our buildings. And then we got Oil Lamp. Looks like a genie lamp. Units gain more line of sight, so they gain +1 line of sight. So now our buildings can see a bit farther, and then obviously our nomads and villagers, when they're doing stuff, will be able to see a bit further with the oil lamp, right? If you run into any sort of trouble where you're getting raided, you'll want to research this, called the Ilgelonian. And basically what it does, and it may depend on what your civ is, what it's actually called. Essentially what these are is just Minutemen. And the way it works is every one of these mahalas that you own will produce a few of these. It'll produce about 2 of them. So if you want this to be more efficient, I recommend you build more mahalas if you possibly can. Like say like 2, 3, as many of them as you can, right? Now, in terms of aging up, because that's probably the most important thing you're wondering about, right? How do we age up, right? Because obviously you see that you can't age up here. It says use your madrasa to go to the next age. What does that mean? What is a madrasa? So a madrasa is this structure right here. If you've played the Africans before in Wars of Liberty, you might know about something called a library. The madrasa is basically the library, right? It has technologies there that are red, blue, or yellow. And the more of those we research, the more further in age that we go. Right? So let's look right here. Red technologies will often involve military type stuff, combat. Yellow will usually be economic. And then blue will usually be civil base. So stuff like infrastructure, defense, all that sort of stuff. And the way madrasa texts work compared to library texts for Africa is madrasa texts have an immediate effect and a long-term effect. So let's look at this one, for instance, tribal dichotomy. Tribal dichotomy gives us a Malik and a Dawat Talab as its first effect, so some military, but its long-term effect is it improves your explorer's build limit, but also making them weaker. So they're not always, straightforward. Sometimes there's a bit of a trade-off to them, depending on what the civ is, right? In the case of the yellow tech, the immediate effect is we get 2 poppy forges, basically a place where we can gather some coin, while also for the long-term effect makes fountains cheaper. So what is a fountain? A fountain is this. It's a long-term late-game economic building. So with most civs in the game, mainly your Europeans and Native Americans, you have a food building and a gold building, right? So a mill and a plantation. Middle East just uses fountains. So what a fountain does is it's this nice irrigated structure here that will produce bushes over time that we need. So if you need food, you're hungry, just build a fountain, and the fountain will slowly add a crop that you can gather. In the case of the Afghans, it will be pomegranates, and it does vary from civ to civ. If we do it with the Uzbeks, it will be plums. Persians will give us apricots, and then the Saudis will give us date palms. So there's a bit of a variety in what the plants actually are, but just note that the effect is pretty much the same. You either can do a food bush or you can do a gold-based one. So in later ages, we'll actually be able to make these poppy bushes from our fountains as well instead of the food ones, depending on what we need. So in that sense, it's sort of like a rice paddy for the Asians, where we can configure food or gold. Except in this case, the ability to gather isn't immediate. We actually have to wait around here for this bush to come out, right? So it's better to be proactive. If you know you're going to need a fountain down the road, start building them early so you can actually utilize them when you need them. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting here for a number of seconds waiting for your emergency food supply to come. And then once the food bush arrives, you can eat your bush. These bushes have a finite amount of resources to them, so just be aware that you will need to wait for more bushes to spawn. So if you end up putting too many vills on and not enough fountains, there's a good chance that your vills will experience a lot of idle time, which could be very bad for your macro. So it's very vital, before you need any sort of late game economy, get like 3 or 4 fountains going, so when you do actually need it, you can already put on about like 20 villagers to start gathering the food you need, and then potentially 4 more fountains on gold, so you can have 20 villagers working on that. So, yep. And sometimes you'll need more fountains. Who knows? You might need 5 or 6. And obviously, too, as we said before, you can obviously use your nomads to supplement that and be able to keep producing goats for you, right? Look at this now. Our little goaty friend here is already at 300 food. So if we were in an urgent situation, we needed food, our goat would already be ready to eat. And if it isn't going fast enough for you, obviously you can send selective breeding. There's also a nomadic pastoralism card that a lot of Middle East civs get that actually improves the rate of the animal fattening as well. So that's another thing to consider putting into your deck if you need it. Uzbeks take it a step further and actually have their yellow techs improve the fattening rate of herdables. So that's something else to consider if you're playing that civ, right? And then let's research one more madrasa tech, maybe the blue one here. The media effect would be giving us a villager, and the long-term effect would be increase the amount of civilians who can garrison inside Mahalas by 5. So I just want to make this a quick note. Afghans, they get a cool civ bonus where they can put their villagers inside their houses as sort of a defense. But this is not normal functionality. This is just the Afghans. I just wanted to point that out. I don't want anybody playing Uzbeks or Persians and asking me, why can't I put my villagers in there to save them? I lost the game because of it. This is only an Afghan-based thing. And in fact, I want to point out something else too. Afghans are the only civ to have blue techs that cost wood. Most Middle East civs, for their blue techs, will be a combination of food and gold. Red techs will always cost gold. Yellow ones will always cost food. And then blue ones will always cost a combination of food and gold. With the only exception here being the Afghans where they cost wood. And these costs have all been tailored so that you can actually afford them and age up in lockstep with your opponent. So there was a lot of planning that went into that basically. Yep, so now we are in age 2. And now we have even more text to look at. We got Ilthar Cannon here. This will basically improve building line of sight even more up to 4. And then we got another tech, Homing Pigeons, which actually improves the unit line of sight by 2. So Middle East not only has good defense in terms of being able to shoot at stuff all the time, but they give us some really good line of sight to see far away from this big imposing fortress. Look at the little, muezzin at the top of the structure, by the way. This is a really long sort of line of sight up there. Imagine climbing up all these ladders here and looking from there how far you could see away. That tells you why basically the line of sight on these buildings is so well kept. Now there is a tech here I want to go over as well at the Citadel. It's called Oral Poetry. So you know how we have nomads, right? They're sort of a combination between a scout that can scout the map, maybe a little bit of combat, but mainly fattening the animals, right? So we do get nomad-based upgrades from our citadels. The first one is Oral Poetry. It improves the combat stats of our nomads and improves their build limit by 1. So if you didn't know, there's also a feature as well where basically your nomad build limit goes up when you age up, by the way. So basically, it starts out at 2 for most civs at the start of the game. But as you go further and further down the line, you're going to be able to have more and more nomads. And this means a few things. Obviously, you could diversify your herdable economy a bit better in different parts of the map. It also means you could potentially make these nomads part of your army and help fight the enemy with them too, since they are a dedicated scout tag unit, so cavalry actually. And now that I see it here, they actually removed the scout tag altogether and made it just standard infantry, which I think is pretty surprising. But either way, it's a very fast infantry unit that you can use in melee to protect your explorer, potentially attack artillery. It's pretty flexible. It's a pretty flexible unit, especially as you start to upgrade them as well. Basically, and obviously if you research oral poetry, that's just one more you're going to be able to add to the stack. and be able to work with. So yeah, a lot of things going on with the Middle East civs, as you can tell, right? So beyond that, let's look at some other cool stuff here. We could look at another tech here at the Mahala, the Bakor. The Bakor is basically our mercantilism for the Middle East. It costs wood instead of gold. Gives us a ton of 2,000 XP that we can put towards shipments, which is really nice. So we'll just do that right now, because why not? Also, let's look for some other things to do with our villagers here. So if you want to research market techs, you'll need to build the bazaar. And this is just a regular market. It has a ton of useful economic technologies there that we can use. And I should mention, by the way, how the fountain works with its upgrades. So instead of having gathering rate related upgrades at the fountain, the upgrades for here just improve the spawn rate of the bushes. So as you saw before, it took a little bit of time to wait for those bushes to spawn from the fountain, making our villagers sit there for a good amount of time before we could eat. Now, if you research these technologies like Quinat, as well as the two other ones that you get in Age 3 and 4 respectively, you won't have to wait as long for these bushes to come out and you can eat right away. Same thing with the gold bushes too, it also affects them. Going back to the bazaar, the bazaar gives us a good variety of technologies. It gives us hunting-based technologies, firstly salukis. It gives us wood-based ones, with the first one being sharpened axe. For gold, it gives us pickaxes, the first one, for mining. But it also gives us fruit-picking technology here. Fruit picking is the first technology related to bushes. So the way that these technologies work is it allows us to gather from not only these fountain-based bushes faster, but also regular bushes too. So if you're on a map where you have a set of bushes near your citadel like this one, these technologies like fruit picking will also benefit those too. So really, Middle East civs are really good on maps that have a ton of bushes on them. As you know, in geography and history of the Middle East, the desert is a very scarce place. The people know how to grab just about any fruit they can find and make good use of it. So these Middle East villagers take no time to waste in actually gathering up anything that they can find really fast. So if we research this, for instance, this will improve all of our bush gather rates by 10%. That includes the food bushes here, that includes the gold bushes here, and then it includes any sort of natural bushes like these ones too, which is really good. And then as you can see here, after researching the first set of texts, then we get a second hunting one, just like we do with the Europeans. This one is called falconry. The second wood one would be large steel saw. The gold one would be windlass. We also get villager upgrade cards, Kul for the hit points, and then we got Jambia for the attack. So kind of similar to the Europeans, except for the fruit picking thing, which is only there just because of how special the Middle East economy is, using fountains instead of mills and plantations. Right? Because obviously the fountain structure itself can only focus on the spawn rate, whilst the bazaar handles the gather rate. So a lot of interesting mechanics going on back and forth there, basically. Beyond that, let's build some other structures that we can look at. So this is the temple. This is a structure that just about every culture in Wars of Liberty can make. It's essentially your church. It can train your healers, and it can trickle experience, just like they can in Definitive Edition. So this is what our temple looks like with the Persianate sector of the Middle East. Just note that for later on, there is a difference between Persianate Middle East civs and Arabic Middle East civs. And it makes a huge difference because it affects the building set, and it also affects the common unit roster quite a lot. So we're looking at a Persianate civ right now. As of right now, the only Arabic Middle East civ in the game is the Saudis. But in a number of months after the patch release, they will do an Egyptian rework, moving the Egyptians from the African culture to the Arabic set of the Middle East culture. So there'll be Saudis and Egyptians on the Arabic side, and then you'll have Afghans, Uzbeks, and Persians on the Persianate side. And that'll matter mostly in how the unit rosters are conducted, except for maybe the artillery, which will be pretty consistent between the two, as well as Navy. Alright, so speaking of military, let's make some military structures right now. So the way military works with the Middle East is a little bit different. So we don't have barracks and stables. We get forges like this, and we get gunsmiths like this, which really alters what we can find at each building. And of course we also get the good old foundry as well, like that. We may as well make some other military related structures like the hookah lounge here and the royal court. The royal court is a little bit more of a special one that we'll go after a little bit later. And we can also make our safe house too, like we can with other civs in the game as well in Wars of Liberty. Safe house, nothing too special about this. Trains your spies. Has all the same improvements that all the other civs do as far as spies is concerned. So it's a little bit bland. I've never really formally went over the spies before, but play the mod, you'll figure them out pretty quick. So this is the forge. The forge gives you all of your units that aren't guns. So it gives you spearmen, swordsmen, cavalry with lances, cavalry with swords, as well as anything with a bow or a javelin. Basically anything that isn't a gun. That's why this building here, the gunsmith, gives us everything that has guns. So musketeers, skirmishers, dragoons, any other fancy example of a gunpowder unit, that's going to be at the gunsmith, right? Anything that isn't gun related appears at the forge. So you see here we got the Cherik. Cherik's just a spearman. The Dawat is a unique Afghan scout unit, so it uses a sword and shield, thus not a gun, so he's here. And then we have this big heavy cavalry here, the Nokar, which is essentially a heavy cavalry. So it's very solid, right? So quite a lot of things to look at here. And then, of course, we got our hookah lounge. It hasn't been built yet for some reason. The hookah lounge is our mercenary building. So with most civs, namely the Europeans, we got the saloon. Asians get the monastery. Middle East gets the hookah lounge. And as you can see right here, we can already train a number of mercenaries from and outlaws. So you got the Wukao, since it's an Asian map, and then you got some mercenaries too. You got the Phalangite, you got the Komitidaji, and then you have a Middle East one here, the Agayel, from the cavalry of Najiv. So quite a bit of variety, This one is more of a Bulgarian mercenary or Macedonian one. This is more of a Latin American one. This is a Middle Eastern one. So a lot of variety. And basically what ended up happening was, to emulate Definitive Edition, Wars of Liberty and more recent patches ended up changing the saloon type buildings to have 3 mercenaries instead of 2 on top of the outlaws. So now you'll notice that this building is a little bit more useful now in that sense. Yeah. And lastly, this is the Royal Court. The Royal Court has a lot of unique properties to it. Essentially what it does is it lets us pick between different factions, and depending on which factions we pick, it will improve the cards that we send, depending on what they are. Right, so basically, if I want to demonstrate the Royal Court to you, what I would have to do is maybe pick one of these. So what do we got? We got the native faction here of the Afghans. You always have a faction of your native country. And then usually you'll have only 2 other foreign countries to align with. So in the case of the Afghans, it's either the British Raj, or India, or the Russians. The only exception to this rule is the Persians, who gets up to 5 foreign countries that they can align themselves with. They get the French, the Austrians, the Italians, the Brits. Yeah, it's quite a huge variety there. Quite insane, actually. Big time, yeah. So yeah, basically now what we're going to do is we are probably going to go with the Russians. So what happens, sort of similar to the Madrasa tax is there's an immediate reward and a long-term reward. So the immediate reward is always going to be something like crates, maybe a wagon, like in this case. You're gonna get something right away for researching it. You're not going to go broke. You're not wasting your time researching these. They're very useful to you. That's what I'm saying. As far as the long-term effect is concerned, there's always going to be two long-term effects. The first long-term effect that you're always going to have is affecting the cards in your home city, and the second one is going to be yet again another effect. So in the case of Russians, for instance, the immediate reward here is giving us a Canton school wagon, basically a barracks that we can train battalions of Frontovics from. And then the long-term effect is going to be basically giving us more HP on all of our military, basically, which will be quite useful. Be quite useful to us, because it'll help our artillery, help our infantry, help our cavalry out, which is quite good. Yeah. And if you see this right here, notice how right now, if we pick this deck right here, it says Russian mission, right? Russia sends 6 Cossacks plus 2 for each Russian courtier chosen. So right now, it says we can only get about 6 Cossacks from this card. But since we're researching the first Russian courtier out of the royal court, now it says we can get 8 Cossacks from it. So that's sort of how this royal court is supposed to be used. Basically, for the units we mostly want to send from foreign allies, we should be sending the royal courtiers that we want aligned with those countries. So if we love the Russian Cossacks a lot, I would suggest you just send all 3 of these. But if you think maybe I might need some sepoys from the British Raj, maybe go for one of these as well. In the case of the Indians, theirs would be basically improving our fattening rate of our livestock. So again, something to synergize with the nomads, which is quite convenient, right? So yeah, big time. This is our Canton school right here. And it's kind of important that you know what a Canton school is, since about 3 out of the 4 Middle East civs in the game right now have the Russians as an option. So it's probably something you should know now rather than later. Basically, you can train Frontovics. Frontovics are just weaker musketeers, just like the Russian civ can get access to themselves, which is quite nice. And then their home city unit would be the Cossacks. So essentially with Russians, you get a 1-2 punch. You get anti-cavalry and you get anti-skirmishers too. You get 2 troops instead of just 1, which is quite good, right? Now, in terms of everything else, we're just going to research some more madrasa texts. And in the case of the Afghans, theirs is a little bit funky because their effects from the blue one always varies a bit, whereas other civs will be more consistent. So again, this is military, red, yellow is economic, and then blue is civil. As far as going from age 2 to 3 is concerned, you're going to need about 7 madrasa texts. To go from age 1 to 2, you'll need 3 madrasa texts. From age 2 to 3, you'll need 7 madrasa texts. So even all 3 of these won't be enough. We'll still have to queue in 1 more to do that. Right? And while that's going on, let's look at maybe some of these units here that are considered to be common units. I'm not going to concern myself too much with the unique units, mostly just the common units. So one common unit that persianate Middle East civs get access to is the Sarbaz. The Sarbaz is a common unit musketeer that these civs can make. Whereas at the forge over here, we got the Chalik. The Chalik is a pikeman that we can make with the Persianates. Likewise, at the foundry, we can already train a unit here called the Zambarak. You might know what the Zambarak is already, right? Because you've played as the Indians in the Asian dynasties. But let me tell you, the Zambarak for the Middle East is quite different than the Zambarak that we got for the Asian dynasties with the Indians. Alright, so if you look at the Sarbaz here, notice how it has a hit point of about 147, range attack of about 26. As its Giselle attack, that is something that we need to be aware of as part of the Afghan civ alone. But basically, the standard range attack is down here of about 23. and then they get a hand attack as well with anti-cavalry. So in this sense, it looks a bit funky because we're dealing with Afghans and they have the special Giselle range attack. But yeah, just know that this is just your standard musketeer with 147 HP, 23 range attack, similar hand attack, and then 20% hack armor. So it's a good backbone unit, basically. And then the Chalik. Chaliks are your pikemen, so they'll have 30% hand armor, 28 siege. They'll have 136 on the HP, and then their hand attack will be about 9 times 5 against cavalry. So essentially, they're pretty much the same as European pikemen in that sense. So you got a standard pikeman and a pretty standard musket. I think the Sarbaz is a bit different than the European line infantry, but still, yeah. Now the fun one to look at is the Zambarak. The Zambarak is a mounted artillery piece. So what this thing does is it has a crush attack of about 35, and then it has a 3x multiplier against line units. So it's basically a mounted Abyss gunner. Yeah, it's a mounted Abyss gunner. It's got the cavalry tag, the ranged cavalry tag, the gunpowder cavalry tag, and the artillery tag. So, interesting enough, whilst a Lancer type cavalry might have a multiplier against an Abyss gunner, they're not going to have the same multiplier against the Zambaraks because they're not, skirmishers. And they're not infantry either, so just regular Lancers won't be able to do multipliers against them either. The best way to fight these would be to either rush them with pikemen or to use things like dragoons and culverins to target them. Those will be good at cooking these, basically. But the thing about the Zambarak that you have to be aware of is it only costs about 2 population, so about the same pop cost as a Hussar. And then the resource cost is rather cheap, 50 wood, 150 gold. Not bad. I mean, you can totally afford these in the majority of your games where you might want to build a foundry, just so you know, right? Yeah, so those are just those units for now, and then we'll see a few more units once we get to age 3, essentially, right? I'll mostly be going over the Nokar, as well as the Midfa and the Mortar. Right, we could also build a dock now as well, since we are on a water map, which I think I'm going to do. I'm going to look for a village over here. This map is archipelago, so we are on a bunch of islands, and we can actually see the water right over there. So let's build a dock real quickly in that spot and get to work, right? And I'll show you some of the Middle Eastern boats as well, since we're privileged enough to find water here. So yeah, just wait for that little villager to mosey on over there. And here we are. So we are in age 3, so I'll just train some more units in the meantime and show them to you. So this is the Nokar here. So the Nokar is the common unit assault cavalry that the Persianates get. The Arabic ones get their whole other ones, so we'll look at those with the Saudis in just a little bit. So we'll just build up this dock right now and be able to make some cool boats. Just note that now we are making the Nokar here. I may as well make some mortars and some midfas as well. Make some midfas and some mortars. These are the 2 other artillery pieces that all Middle East citizens can get access to. It doesn't matter if you're an Arabic or a Persianate, you will always, unless you have a unique unit exception, have access to Zambaraks, midfas, and mortars, with them all having their own special use case, of course. So here we are on the water. And we can make the Sambuk. This is your light ship. The Bagla is your heavy ship. And then you have your last boat over here on the side, the Boom. The Boom is your siege ship. So sort of like your monitor in that sense, right? Now we'll just research some more madrasa texts and try to age up as soon as possible. And go to the industrial age in the meantime. So these are the Nokars. The Nokars are kind of a fascinating unit. So essentially they're very related to the Escoltas, right? When we played the Latin American Civ and you have the Escolta, basically a heavily armored cavalryman with the lance, and that lance does multipliers against heavy infantry. That's how the Nokars work, but there's a very special property with the Nokars. So the Nokars have a very long lance, a very long spear. Look at how long this spear is up in the air. Escolta looks nothing like that, as you know, when you see them in combat. And when it comes to combat with the Nokars, This is how they operate. So let's say they're attacking this. Essentially, the Nokars can engage with units in melee without the units engaging in them with melee. So normally a cavalry will go right up against a musketeer and go head to head with them, and then the musket will pull out his bayonet and start trying to get him. But the way the Nokar works is because he's got such a long spear, the Nokar can essentially be in this sort of a melee mode where the unit they're fighting will still try to fight them in range mode. Sometimes this can be a good thing, like in the case of small numbers of musketeers, because it means you don't have to deal with the consequences of the bayonet attack. But in larger situations where you're dealing with large formations of muskets, the fact that your assault units don't have any pierce armor can actually kill them easier, because it means that those bullets are going right through them and doing pure real damage to them. So yeah, you gotta be totally aware of that when you're playing as these civs, essentially. Yeah. And we'll also research some of these too. Nothing new at the Mahala until we get to Imperial Age. But I should show you as well, if I can get a villager. Hey little villager there, can you build me another fountain? Alright. As you can see over here, this one is totally stuffed with food bushes, right? And obviously we can research this new tech as well, Suquia. This is the second spawn raid related tech at the fountain for berries. And then our second gather raid one at the bazaar would be pruning shears. And then our third wood one would be scaffolding right there. So get that one as well. That's sort of like circular saw. But this is how we would change it to gold. We'd start out with pomegranates, and then we change it to poppies so we can get the gold-based bush. It's very important for you to know that. So you're not sitting there thinking, how do I get gold? Nah, you just got to press on this little button here for the configure, and then you'll be able to start getting your gold-based bushes, which is very good, right? So yeah, here we are in another age. Should we go with British Raj, or should we continue with the Russians? You know what? We already have a Canton school to make Frontovics. I don't think I want another one, so why don't we go with Sir Louis Carlavnari? And by the way, if you love history, these royal courtier tech descriptions includes who they are as real people. So Sir Louis Carlavnari is described as a British military administrator by Kabul. And then over here, you got Nikolai Skoletov is described as a Russian diplomat in Afghanistan. So there's little descriptions like that to learn a bit of history too. And then if you look over here, Sher Ali Khan, reformist Emir of Afghanistan. So it's a lot of cool little history lessons there too, if you're into that sort of lore, right? So yeah, so far we've learned a lot of stuff, right? Now, one thing to bring up now that we're in the later ages too is you don't have an arsenal type building as the Middle East. You actually do all of your arsenal techs at the military building. So all of your... Well, I can't even describe it the same way that we would describe it a European, right? So if you have any artillery-based arsenal techs, they would be researchable at the foundry. If they're forge-related units, they'll appear at the forge. If they're gunsmith-related, they will appear at the gunsmith. So, in general, arsenal techs at the forge are going to benefit your hand infantry, as well as your hand cavalry, and also your archers, too. Whereas the ones at the gunsmith are going to benefit your skirms, your muskets, and your dragoons, on average. Just saying. So it's a little bit complicated. Also, important thing to know, Middle East does have advanced arsenal cards too. They get the advanced forge for the forge building, and then they get the advanced gunsmith too. Just note that not all civs get these. Some will just have one of these, like Saudis just have the advanced gunsmith. Uzbeks just have the advanced forge. Afghans are fortunate enough to get both, and then the Persians, I don't think they get any of those, but they get their own unique one called the Advanced Foundry, which essentially does something completely different. So you might be wondering to yourself, all right, so since there is no arsenal building, what do these techs compensate for, basically? Yeah, because you might be thinking, I remember the most important thing that the advanced arsenal did was unlock an age early, right? So if you don't have a building to unlock early, what is the point of sending these cards other than the text? Well, essentially what these cards do is they improve the work rate at the building. So they improve the research rate of techs as well as the training of units. So essentially, on top of regular training cards like Ansar here to train your infantry with the millies, you also can send these advanced cards too to make it even better as well. Whereas one like Ansar is going to be generic and universal and benefit the training of all infantry, Advanced Gunsmith would only benefit your gun-based infantry, and then Advanced Forge would only benefit your archers and hand infantry. So, like your dismounted scout units with swords, your spearmen, also your archers. So, just be aware of that. If you double dip with all these, your training rates will be pretty insane, right? And obviously we also have alchemy as our one for artillery, kind of related to engineering school. Again, with Persians, if you have advanced foundry with them, that would sort of be the relationship like this to this and this to that, right? So yeah, definitely. Do note with Middle East too, if you want to do herdable economy, you do get a card called Dromedary Ranching. Middle East, they love their stinky camels, right? So instead of unlocking cows to fatten, you get to unlock stinky camels to smell. With lots of meat, apparently. Those humps have a lot of meat on them. So yeah, essentially if you're tired of using the goats or the sheep, now you can fatten camels as well. Also, as far as gather rates is concerned, you do get improved gather rate cards for the bushes as well. For instance, so Zuni here would benefit the gold-based bushes. Zirpots would benefit the food-based ones. And then up here you got coffee grinders. And then sherbet for the food. And then there's some for Mage 1 as well that I didn't include, like poppy tears for the gold. And then food would be date syrup. Yeah, pretty much. And now that we've sent the Indian courtier, now we can get more sepoys with our cards, which is pretty nice. Actually, let's send that one since it's a bit beefier, right? Most definitely. And how many madrasa texts do we need to age up? Probably just a handful more, right? Oh yeah, definitely. So we'll just do a few more of those and we should be all set. Something important I have to tell you. So with the Middle East, since your town centers are more valuable than regular ones, right? Your citadels are literally giant hulking forts with automatic range attack and other stuff. You only get an improved, basically when you're going from age 2, from age 2 to 3 I should say, you get an improved build limit on your town centers, right? Usually it goes from like 1 town center up to 3. In the case of Middle East, you can only get an improvement from 1 town center to 2 town centers because your town centers are much more important. So what happens if you want to have 3 or more town centers? So the way Middle East home cities work is you get all these cards here and they end up giving you a citadel wagon, just like any covered wagon card would be, right? On top of that, they improve the town center build limit by 1. So if we research Ghazni Citadel, we get a build limit of 3 citadels. If we also decide, Ghazni isn't enough, we'll add in Kanandar here, then we get a build limit of 4 citadels. And then if we also send Herat will get our citadel build limit up to 5. So it's initially, if you don't include any cards, your town center build limit's going to look a little bit bad, right? And your boom might be hindered somewhat. But as long as you send at least one of these cards, and they're going to be named differently for whatever civ you are, by the way. It's all geographically based, right? You're going to need at least one of these cards to get that standard build limit of 3 town centers, right? And if you want to go even further, you can take it further and get up to a build limit of about 5 town centers if you sent all 3 of these types of cards, right? Uzbeks take it a step further and have a citadel build limit +1 per Egypt, I believe. So they go even farther. They're sort of like the Portuguese of the Middle East. And then even beyond that, they get about 4 of these types of Citadel cards instead of just 3, as well as all sorts of upgrades on them and stuff in the home suite too. So we're not going to get too much into that since we're not looking at the Uzbeks, but just thought I'd point that out to you, because why not? Alright, so now that we are in Industrial Age, we can look at the siege ship as well up here in the corner, right? So this is the Boom. This is the siege one. And as far as our Navy is concerned, we also get a sailor unit with the Middle East that's going to be universal, the Kalasi. Kalasi is just a standard sailor infantry we can use to fight mainly siege troopers and artillery. It's quite useful. And while we're waiting for that, we'll see the Boom coming out as well. You would upgrade your Kalasis from the dock just like you would any sort of naval soldier. But we also get techs here as well. We got techs like Gagur, which benefits the fishing rate. We got Demore looting. Light ships have more hit points. Shuan Plank. Heavy ships have more hit points. And then we got Nafta. Siege ships are improved in combat. So basically, Middle East dock upgrades focus on making the earlier ships tankier and generally improving the late game boats too. So here's the Boom, by the way, right in that spot. Very good. And now we will probably make some artillery. We'll make a Midfa and a mortar. Actually, we already made them, so we don't have to do that. So here's the mortar. The mortar is a hybrid between a mortar, as the Europeans call it the mortar. This mortar is a bit different because this mortar can attack units, and it can actually have multipliers against artillery. So think of it almost like the Chinese hand mortars, but essentially it's a better version of it because it's going to be stronger, you know. It's a 5-pop one versus the 1-pop one that the Chinese get. So all you have to do is just make a few of these and you should be able to blast any fort down, attack falconets. That's what these are for. And then the Midfa is just your Middle Eastern type falconet based cannon, right? If you want a lot of cheap spammable stuff, do the Zambarax. If you want some real cannonry, do the Midfa. Just know that, and you should be pretty alright with your tactics pretty much, playing as Middle East, right? Just put a Citadel there, because why not? Now we got some more techs, too, to look at. We got Caravan Raid, Nomads. This is the second Nomad tech, by the way. It essentially adds anti-villager multipliers to Nomads, right? So at the start of the game, to not turn it into a unbalanced experience, the devs thoughtfully added a villager malice to the nomads, so you can't use them for raiding at the start of the game. But if you want to do raiding later in the game, you can do caravan raid, and they will actually add anti-villager multipliers onto your nomads, so they'll actually will be raid friendly. Right? You also got your Explorer base upgrades at the Citadel as well, with the first one here being Ceremonial Zulfikar. And then you got Boiling Oil to essentially add more range attack onto your Citadels. So you can actually upgrade the range stats on your Citadels, which is quite nice, yeah. And you might be wondering something too. Where are the towers, right? Where are the outposts? So, do they just not have outposts since they have all these citadels? No, actually they do get towers. But interestingly enough, since Afghans have the bonus of allowing their vills to hide inside the mahalas, their anti-bonuses, they don't have towers, because essentially the houses are the towers. But Afghans do give us a nice card here called the Minaret of Jam, which will essentially give us towers and unlock them in a time when we normally couldn't as Afghans, which is pretty nice, you know, it's pretty good. Because obviously as Afghans you don't normally have the privilege to make towers, but now we're going to be able to make towers and actually show them to you and show you what they do exactly, which is quite nice, right? And just looking back at the bazaar as well, you do actually get one more fruit picking tech as well, which is called the Pomology one, right there. And then you do get a third spawn raid bush one too, called Ab Anbar too. So just figured I'd point that out as well, so you're sort of aware of everything that's going on with these civs too. Alright, so once that's done we should be able to look at that. And now I actually want to start going over some of the arsenal texts with you so you know what they're all about. So for the foundry, you got Chinese snow, artillery and combat buildings deal more damage to warships. So essentially you become really good at fighting naval vessels, which is quite nice. Arlaba improves artillery hit points and allows them to move faster. So it kind of combines True Union with the artillery tech for the Europeans and improves their HP. So it's kind of a mishmash there, which is quite nice. And then you get one last one here too, Book of Optics. Book of Optics simply just increases the line of sight of artillery by 6. Which is a pretty standard one to do, right? Now from the gunsmith, there's a lot of text we have to look at. You got this first one over here. These are the standard ones, by the way. This is your training base one. Since you don't have a capital, you have to get the training tech at the military building. And then these are the ones that you would get through advanced gunsmith. These are advanced gunsmith. These are standard, and this is your training one. So let's just do the training one, get out of the way. Foreign trainers. Allows all your gunsmith units to train faster. This is the first normal arsenal tech. Al-Kamza. Gunpowder cavalry gains more range, damage, and line of sight. So it's the same exact thing as ranged cavalry Kakarul for the Europeans. So you can do that. Then you got Jizayar. Jizayar is just your counter-infantry rifling. So not only does it improve skirmishers against musketeers, it also improves anti-skirmishers against skirmishers. If you remember from Definitive Edition, we got counter-Jaegers, you got Pandurs, Schiavonis, all those sort of anti-skirms, right? We got those in Wars of Liberty too. And what this tech does, it says, not only are we going to give you the standard effect of counter-infantry rifling, we're also going to make all those Schiavoni-type units better against their counter as well, which is quite convenient, right? And then as far as the advanced gunsmith text is concerned, the first one you got is Card. Not to be confused with like playing cards, but Card with a K. Line units equipped with bayonets do more hand attacks, so it's the same as socket bayonet. Nothing too special. But now this one is very special. Theory of Mael. Theory of Mael takes all of our gunpowder infantry and it improves the damage. So they do more damage, about 10% more damage, which is quite nice. But it also improves their range and line of sight by 2. So if you have a musketeer like the Sarbaz over here, let's look at the Sarbaz, or even make some Giselechis here. The Giselechis in particular have a pretty long range themselves. They basically like snipers almost. You research the Theory of Mael. These go up to like 24 range, which is insane. And then the Sarbaz goes up to a range of about 14, which as you can see is pretty good. Pretty good indeed. Yeah, most definitely. By the way, I have to tell the devs to improve the Sarbaz range by 16 when my others research, by the way. I just noticed that. I was like, oh, hey, there's something wrong there. Let me tell. Yep, it's still in the beta testing phase, so just be aware of that. So this is Kodespa here, and obviously now it's, yeah, they gotta do that too. Just having a bit of fun, but yeah. You sort of get the idea, right, basically. And then we also get some text at the hookah lounge as well. Hashish improves our outlaw stats by 25% as well as their train time, which is quite nice. Shisha is quite good because Shisha actually improves the population cost of mercenaries. So if you have like a 3-pop one like the Phalangite, these will now cost only 2, similar to the Agayos. Obviously the Kamitaji wouldn't be effective since only a 1-pop one. And then Takia, spies can do something. I don't think that one has an effect yet. We'll have to check that at a later date. But essentially, all I want to do now is just go up to Imperial Age and just show you what some of these Mahala techs do in the late game. And we can show you what the emergency unit sending system is like as well. So we'll just send this, and then we'll receive 2 of these Iljali at each one of these Mahala houses. So as far as the late game text is concerned, we got Shahilistan. This is the same as immigrants. So essentially improves the population of your civ by 100 without the need for houses or town centers, which is quite good. You got Hamza. Hamza is the same as blockade, so it prevents your enemy from sending cards. And then you got Nazar. Nazar gives you line of sight of all your enemies, so it's the same as spies. And then we got Desert Farming. Desert Farming essentially improves all your food work from bushes by 50%. It says all food, but for right here it just says bushes, so just assume that for now. And then you got Lusterware, which improves your mining rate, whaling rate, as well as your berry bush gather rate for the gold. And then you got Rug Manufacture for the wood. So that's everything you need to know about looking at a persianate civ, pretty much. There's also some cool other little doodads to look at as well, like the Salukis. So basically the way all the Middle East civs work is they get a trainable dog called the Saluki. You have to send like the Explorer upgrade card to do it, and then you should be able to access them this way, like this. The Salukis are pretty cool, but now here's the cool thing. They get an infinite card that not only sends Salukis, but it upgrades them too. So if you keep sending Saluki, the Saluki stats will actually go up. And obviously if we delete these again and again, I'm sorry for the cruelty there to the doggos, but yeah, I just want to demonstrate. You can just keep sending this again and again and again, and essentially the Salukis will grow over time. It's sort of like a growth-based card, which is pretty good, by the way, you know, because it ends up making them a much better military unit overall, pretty much. Yeah, and if we look at the Salukis right here, notice how they are starting to get stronger every time we sort of delete them and retrain them again. And I haven't done a lot of experimenting with the Salukis before, but I do think in like a game where you have a lot of time on your hands to like macro and stuff, we might want to start seeing if this Saluki based method here holds any sort of weight at all. So that could be pretty good. I mean, eventually if we send this enough times, Salukis are just going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. You know what I mean? They're just going to grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And eventually probably be like full-on Yulons, probably, that don't cost any pop. Yeah. And something else I want to point out too, if it might be obvious, it might not be, is for the Royal Court units. So like our Sepoys and our Cossacks, these do shadow tech with each age up, just like consulate units do, just like Latin American immigrant units do. So don't worry about that. These units will just upgrade themselves for you, so you don't have to worry about that, which is quite nice. Right, and we haven't looked at the tower yet either, so let's do that right now. Tower. Here's the tower. So the tower is sort of, in terms of the way that it works defensively, it works just like the way every other Civ's town center does. So it doesn't shoot at anything, it just acts as like a big line of sight. But once we throw villages inside, then it gains its range attack based on how many villas are inside of it. So the Citadel acts like an outpost in terms of its combat ability, whereas the tower acts like a town center. And we can actually upgrade this too to improve its hit points first. And then we can research this as well, fortified town center, to improve the hit points and also change it from a gun-based attack to a cannon-based one too, which is quite nice. So just see right here, once we get this, then it becomes a full-on beautiful tower, and then you can see its range attack is now a bombard-based one, which is quite good. Yeah. So there we go with the Persianates. Also, I want to show you this. This is Rug Manufacture there for the wood. And then we got some more Citadel-based tech, so boiling oil improves the Citadel range attack. And then we get another one too, Malabitun, which improves the Citadel range attack by 100%. And then Bivzibek armlets would be our second Explorer base upgrade. So there's that. And then one more thing I wanted to show you too is, if you don't like training villagers one by one as the Millies, a lot of the Civs have access to a card named Polygamy. And Polygamy as you know, will actually allow you to train 2 villagers instead of 1, but it'll take a slower amount of time to do. So if you do that, essentially you lose your ability to train villagers, but your TCs end up becoming like, oh, I'm in town centers sending out batches of 2 units. It normally wouldn't be this fast, but I have a cheat code on, so yeah, it looks that fast. Alright, so I want to look at some stuff with you from the home city view, and then we're probably going to restart the game as the Saudis. Or, I mean, we can try to boot it here as well, but I'd kind of like to be... Yeah, I'll probably restart so the graphics look good. So let me find Tilan. Where are you, Tilan? Tilan. So there's Tilan there. I just wanted to show you really quickly from the home city view. Essentially, there is a cavalry-based training card for the Middle East as well called Folucia, like this. So just be aware of that. Also, there is a common unit Dragoon for the Persianates that you did not see with the Afghans because they get the Kodespas instead. The common unit Dragoon for the Persianates would be the Gulam, or it's called the Gilman here. I call it the Gulam because the Gulam is a unit that I've been used to over the years with different Middle East civs, so I'll just call it the Gulam for that sake. Alright, so now we will quickly restart the game, and we will load in as the Saudi Arabians, because now we have to look at the only Arabic-based civ in the game. Now, Saudis are going to look a bit different in the game when we look at them. We're not going to really focus on any of that. We're just going to focus on the common units that they have access to. So let's just go into that. A lot of stuff with the Saudis is pretty similar to the other Middle East civs, but they're kind of an odd duckling, so we kind of have to ignore all that stuff and just focus on the tidbits that we do care about, which is the military stuff. Let's load in right now and check out those common units that I was talking about. The artillery ones are the same as all the other Middle East civs, so we really don't need to care about that too much. But yeah, no, let me just enter some cheat codes here and train those things up real quick so we can look at them really fast. By the way, this oasis that I just built for Saudis, that's basically what they get instead of the fountain. It's considered an annex, which means it has to be built next to the citadel structure, just so you know. Yep, and then the other thing to know with Saudis is they don't have buildings, they just use caravans, so we actually have to make them address a caravan like this, and then research a ton of stuff out here like that, yeah. Alright. Okay. So now that that's done, let's just make a forge and a gunsmith real quick and go over the common units so you know what they are and what they do. So the first common unit of the Arabic Middle Eastern civs is the Jundi. So the Jundi is essentially a Arabic-based Middle Eastern musketeer. As you can tell, the stats are a little bit different. You know, their HP is about 130, which is a bit different than the one of the Sarbaz. Range attack is about 23, and then hand attack is about 15. So, just be aware of that. Basically, if you're running the cavalry at all, these are the guys you probably want to have. They're also pretty decent at fighting at range and sieging, just like any other musket is. And then the next unit to look at would be the Shorta. The Shorta is a Arabic Middle Eastern dragoon. And the Shorta is actually statistically similar to a Reuter. Has a range attack of about 20, has some HP of about 240. So it's a one-pop dragoon, which means they're not necessarily that strong, but you can mass up a ton of these things and run them at your enemy. So already we've seen sort of 2 anti-cavalry based Arabic units, and then we have 2 more units at the Forge. So at the Forge, Arabs get a unit called the Ghazi. The Ghazi is a raiding unit. So on top of being sort of like a coyote runner and having that sort of scout tag and being able to run fast and having a hand attack to like raid skirmishers, archers, artillery, and vills with, they do get an anti-villager multiplier built in. So their base stat is only 12 hand attack, which is kind of bad. It's not horrible, but it's not as good as a Hussar. But the fact that it's a one-pop unit is something to consider. But if you're considering raiding against Villies, then the hand attack goes up to a whopping 24x. Yeah, it goes up to 30. 30 hand attack against villagers. So when it comes to fighting villagers, their hand attack's going to be the same as a Hussar. But going against anything else, they're going to be kind of mediocre against that. They're not going to be bad. Like, one thing to definitely consider when you're playing as an Arabic Civ, it's a trash unit that only costs food and wood. So if you lose map control and you don't have access to gold. Ghazis are a great trash unit to spam. Like, if you know you're going to be fighting any sort of skirms or falcons or anything, and you have no gold, make a ton of Ghazis, right? But you do get a gold-based cabinet too. You got the Falis, or the Fali. The Falis. This is essentially the Arabic assault cavalry, the Nokar being the Persianate one. The Falis is the Arabic one. So what makes the Falis a bit different is, essentially it's just a normal assault unit. It has like a normal range. Stats are pretty normal. 30 hand attack, 40 hand armor. Pretty standard for an assault cavalry. HP is also pretty standard. But what sets it apart is, it gets the dodge ability. You know what the dodge ability is, right, from the monk-based explorers from the Asian dynasties, right? So what dodge means is there's a chance that the cavalry will actually avoid taking damage from a range attack, which is quite nice. So essentially when you're fighting up against muskets or dragoons, which normally can give them a bit of trouble, there's a good chance that your Fadis will dodge that attack and not incur any damage. So there's a bit of RNGesus. Basically, these guys sacrifice any sort of definitive advantage as a unit, all to have good RNGesus on their side. In some rare instance, they might get out of a fight without taking any sort of range damage at all and be totally unscathed. But they might also not. They might missing all the attacks and then take full damage and just croak, too. So whenever you're using these Faris, definitely make the assumption that they're going to take full damage. Never assume that they're going to dodge attacks. If they do dodge attacks, it's great, makes it better. But if you don't dodge any attacks, that's something to consider as well. So, I mean, definitely something you'd have to consider there, too. Yeah. So, in general, I think that's everything we need to look at for Middle East right now. As far as I know, they haven't added a new common unit for the Great War Age yet for this faction, so I don't have to do that. I mean, I could look over some more common cards with you, which I think I might do. So, just for good reference, there is some cards here I want to show you, basically. So, the Middle East, they get this card here called Nomadic Pastoralism. This is essentially what allows you to find your herdables faster near the nomads. And then there's this as well, Eid Kurban, which is another important card that I did not go over. Essentially, Eid Kurban allows it so you can gather herdable meat 300% faster. So it's the same card as the vanilla British get in the OG game. So this, and this all go hand in hand, and you might want to use all three of these together if you really like herdables. Yeah. Also, you got a cool looking wood card here, Intarsia. It's like basically a normal wood chopping card. You also get 3 mining cards too. You got Wakwaf, Nielo, and Dinar. These are all for mining only. You would think that this might be a version of Royal Mint and allow you to do all gold, but unfortunately not. Middle East is a bit restrictive in that way. Yeah, for sure. And let me see what else we got here. These cards help you with your Royal Court stuff. This will allow courtiers to send more units. And then this will essentially allow your mission cards to send faster and the units to be stronger too. So there's that. Just checking for anything else we have to be aware of here before I sign off. I think we're pretty much good here for now. Oh yeah, this, Nada, enables one additional church to be built. Not church, madrasa. So if you want to research multiple texts at the same time at the madrasa and you normally can't, you're going to need Nada to do it. And this is a card that exists for some of the persianate civs, but it also exists for the Saudis. Hence the effect on the madrasa caravan there. So, yeah, a lot of stuff. And then you also have some native texts here too. Native Alliance, Allied wants train faster. Beya, get a shipment of warriors from each native that you're allied with. Jizza, get 500 gold from every native that you're allied with. Dar el Salam, natives cost less food and wood but extra gold. Then you got advanced caravanserai. Now, since you already have the range attack applied to the caravanserai, what this does, it actually adds pop space to them. Which, not bad. You could technically use this to surplant having to build mahalas, which could be good. So I'm not going to complain about that. And then you got kinship. Yeah, kinship. So yeah, I think that's everything we got to look at, right? Looked at both the Persianates and the Arabic sides of the Middle East culture. Next entries into this series will be based on the individual civs. I'll do an overview on the Saudis, one on the Afghans, one on the Uzbeks, and one's on the Persians or Iranians, depending on what you want to call them. Some text in the game calls them Iran, some calls them Persia. So, yeah, we'll go with either or at that point. But yeah, sign off now from the showcase of the Middle East culture, and hope you have a good day before you wait for the next one to come out. Yeah, get ready for it.